Hey everybody, welcome to the Theros Beyond Death preview recap on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always for January 8th, and we've got about 15 to get through, so we're not slowing down. We don't have too many cards left to go. Let's get started. Up first, we have Elspeth Conquers Death. Elspeth Conquers Death is 3 white for an enchantment saga at rare. Act 1, exile target permanent an opponent controls with converted mana cost 3 or greater. Act 2, non-creature spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast until your next turn. Act 3, return target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter or a loyalty counter on it. It's interesting, but I don't know that I want to pay 5 mana for any of this really in limited. 5 mana to exile something if my opponent has something that I can exile. They probably do. Is okay, but expensive. Act 2 really just doesn't matter. Like for 1 turn, my opponent has to pay 2 more. Oh no. And then Act 3, if I do have a creature or planeswalker in the battlefield, I get to return it. Cool. That's a bonus. That's not something usually that, mono white gets. Black white can get it, but not necessarily mono white. But yeah, limited, this seems like an okay card, but a little bit of a bust still to me. The board, the entire game has to be set up perfectly for you to get like full value out of this. Outside of standard or outside of limited, I don't see this doing anything. Maybe in Brawl. I haven't talked about Brawl much because I feel like Brawl is such a small card pool because it's only standard and it's only singleton that every card has consideration for Brawl. But yeah, beyond Brawl and limited, I don't know that I see a place for this at all. Up next is Elspeth's Nightmare. Elspeth's Nightmare is 2 and a black for an enchantment saga at uncommon. Act 1, destroy target creature an opponent controls with power 2 or less. Act 2, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Act 3, exile target opponent's graveyard. This seems totally fine. It's 3 mana for a defeat, I think, is kill a creature with power 2 or less, if I remember correctly. And then a Thoughtseize that you don't have to pay life for. And then exile a graveyard. Cool. All of this is okay, and the fact that it's only 3 mana, it gives you a devotion for a few turns, it's an enchantment. All of this equals a card that is fine. It's not super exciting. It is going to kill something small, and you're going to have a lot of situations where you play this or you consider playing this and you just don't have a target for that first act, and that's going to suck. So limited, it's fine. All of the parts of this card add up to a card that is fine. Outside of limited, I don't know that this gets a play. I just don't know where you'd ever want this stuff. It's all just like a turn too late for anything other than limited. Up next is Triumphant Surge. Triumphant Surge is 3 and a white for an instant at common. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. You gain 3 life. So it's Smite the Monstrous, but you gain 3 life. Sure, it's going to be okay in limited. We'll have to see how big the creatures are on average. I expect, like many sets, this is going to be a card that should be in your sideboard. If you're desperate for a card, you can probably play it main board and generally have a target worth hitting. And then out of the sideboard, it's going to be amazing. But yeah, outside of limited, this is just never a card that sees play elsewhere. Up next is Agonizing Remorse. Agonizing Remorse is 1 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it or a card from their graveyard. Exile that card. You lose 1 life. This is Thoughtseize, except it costs 2. It only deals 1 to you, and you can take a card from their graveyard if you want to. This actually seems really good. For limited, I'm not a huge fan. This is just not an effect that I play much in limited. If you watched me on stream today, you saw me confused many times over multiple people playing Memory Theft in Throne of Eldraine limited. But Thoughtseize effects just never are that good in limited. And this one's probably not that good either. You could play it, but there's just better cards. Now, outside of limited, this isn't Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize's huge power is that you can play it on turn 1 when you're not playing anything else anyways. This costs 2, that's twice as much. That's a huge step. But this is still Thoughtseize, plus you can rip something from the graveyard if need be. I have a feeling that this will 100% see standard play, pioneer play, brawl play, commander play. I would not expect this to crack into modern. I don't know if it'll get any deeper into legacy, but I think this is a card that's going to be played. And this is going to be another one of those uncommons that'll, hold a little tiny bit of value. Still not something you would value pick at, F&M draft, but I think it'll be there. Up next is Mystical Renewal. Mystical Renewal is a single green mana for an instant. Put target enchantment at the bottom of its owner's library. That's right, a single mana at instant speed to kill, essentially, an enchantment creature in limited. This card is fantastic. It may not always have a great target, but it's so cheap and so good at what it does that this is absolutely a main deckable card. I was talking about how Revoke Existence is probably main deckable, at least one of. This is 100% main deckable. Sorcery speed, a single mana, green just doing what other colors try to do way better. Outside of limited, probably not as much play. Not unless there's extremely scary enchantments that crack into standard or something. Up next is Nyx Bloom Ancient. Nyx Bloom Ancient is 4 green for an enchantment creature elemental at Mythic. It's a 5/5 with trample. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much mana of that mana, instead. So yeah, you like your Mirari's Wake? Well, what if you get 3 times instead of just, double or an extra mana? What if it makes your mana dorks tap for 3 times as much mana as well as your lands? This card seems nutty, not for limited. For limited, it's a 5/5 trample. In limited, on turn 7, it doesn't matter that I now have 21 mana. My hand is typically empty. The fact that I get to cast the last card or the last 2 cards in the same turn is probably not that exciting. This is just not a good card for limited at all. Outside of limited, I don't know if it'll see standard play. I have to see exactly how it interacts with Nissa. I haven't fully looked into that interaction. And again, I don't know what you're doing with all of that mana. Commander, I think people are very excited because, of course, if you can cheat this out in any way, it's just a ludicrous amount of mana ramp. Things like Primeval Titan are banned for a reason. Yeah, we'll see just how good this is in those janky, big Timmy style formats. Limited, I think this is actually the worst for it. But we'll see if it cracks anywhere else. Tell me what you're going to do with this, because I feel like people have some shenanigans for it. Up next is a reprint, Heliod's Pilgrim. Heliod's Pilgrim is 2 and a white for a creature human cleric at common. She's a 1/2. When she enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an aura card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Now, she's not a reprint from Theros. She's a reprint from Magic 2015, and she was also in Ultimate Masters, and she was solid there. Super solid. Super solid card. Being in a set that actually has a lot more auras could be potentially even better. Obviously, you need to have the auras for her to go off with. You don't want to just have like one aura, because if you draw it first, she's a 1/2 for 3, which is awful. But yeah, if you have a bunch of hits for her, she can actually be pretty decent in limited. Outside of limited, I don't see a play for her. Up next is Bronzehide Lion. Bronzehide Lion is green-white for a creature cat at rare. It's a 3/3. You can pay green-white to give it indestructible until end of turn. When it dies, you return it to the battlefield. It's an aura with enchant creature you control, and pay green-white, enchanted creature gains indestructible until end of turn and it loses all other abilities. This loses its other abilities, not the enchanted creature. So yeah, it's a 3/3 for 2 that you can make indestructible for 2 on command. That's great. When it dies, it makes something else have that ability of pay green white, give it indestructible. This looks great. It's obviously a direct callback to Fleecemane Lion. I think I like Fleecemane Lion more, but this card just seems super good. It's going to be fantastic and limited. I imagine this will see some standard play. And of course, Brawl's going to love it. Commander might find some spots for it in various green-white decks. It's obviously not going to be the linchpin of a deck board, but it could be a totally fine include. But yeah, this is, I think, a solid limited card, and I think a solid standard card as well. Up next is Shadow Spear. Shadow Spear is a single generic mana for a legendary artifact equipment at rare. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and lifelink. Pay 1 permanent your opponent's control, lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Equipped for 2 generic mana. This is probably okay. It's like a honed Kopesh, +1/+1, equip cost of 2, only a single mana to cast it in the first place, and trample and lifelink are cool little bonuses, so it's probably fine equipment. It's not amazing, it's not game ending or anything like that. And the ability to get rid of hexproof and indestructible isn't going to come up as much as you think. The indestructibles, the hexproofs, those are mythic in this set generally. You're just not going to get this card, which is a rare, and face those mythics. It's just not going to happen that often. So don't overrate this card. It's not incredible by any means. And we saw Mystical Revelation, Mystical Renewal, which is infinitely better at killing a god than this card, and it's an uncommon. So don't go crazy for this card in limited. It's okay in limited. Like I said, it's like a pretty decent honed Kopesh, but be careful there. Beyond limited, I think people will definitely put this in commander decks and stuff like that just to have an out against hexproof creatures. But of course, again, I think there are better outs, things like Council's Judgment, stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's about it. I think people are going a little bit gaga over this card. I don't think it's quite worth that. But if I'm missing something on that, let me know. Up next is Thassa's Intervention. Thassa's Intervention is X blue blue for an instant at rare. Choose one. Look at the top X cards of your library. Put up to 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Or counter target spell unless its controller pays twice X. This card seems totally fine. It's blue blue X to instant speed draw cards. Obviously blue blue 1 to draw 1 card isn't exciting. Blue blue and 2 to draw 2 cards, that's basically inspiration. A little bit hard to cast inspiration, but that's a standard cost that we pay to draw 2 cards at instant speed. Anything more than that and you're just doing, pretty darn solid for yourself. And if you find yourself in a spot where you actually just really need to counter something, this card's totally fine here. I think this card's great for limited. Outside of limited, it's drawing cards and countering spells. There's going to be people who want to play this in Brawl and Commander for sure. It's not going to make any splashes in Modern or anything. I don't know if it'll make any splashes in Standard. I actually think it might. I think it almost must, actually. I think some Esper controls or even some Azorius controls like this would be pretty happy with a spell that either counters or draws cards. That's just a lot of flexibility. So I'm actually going to keep my eye on this. I think this might see some play in Standard for sure. Pioneer, maybe? Next is Nightmare Shepherd. Nightmare Shepherd is 2 black black for an enchantment creature demon. It's a 4/4 flyer. That's right, we have another flyer in black that's really well costed. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile that creature. If you do, create a token copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1 and is a nightmare in addition to its other abilities. So it's a 1/1, but it has the other stuff. So there's activated abilities, triggered abilities, stuff like that. It still has those. This just seems really great for limited. It's a 4/4 flyer for 4 in black. You're playing that every time and feeling pretty damn happy about it. And then the bonus is cool. If you're just getting chump blockers out of it, your 3/3 vanilla is dying and becoming a 1/1, I won't say no to that. And if I do get to get my creatures back that do have interesting abilities or could re-trigger an ETB ability as such or things like that, this is just going to be great. Seems fantastic in limited. Standard, I don't quite know what's going to go on with that. I guess actually there's some really gross stuff that could happen with this. You sacrifice your cat to the oven and your cat goes to the graveyard, but then you get a token version of that cat that ETBs and drains 1. Yeah, actually this could see some standard play, and it got some weird text that can do stuff that means this will definitely see commander play, and I assume Brawl play. Pioneer and such, I don't know if there's enough for this to do anything with, but I could definitely see some standard shenanigans going on with this. Up next is Loathsome Chimera. Loathsome Chimera is 2 and a green for a 4/1 creature Chimera. That's it. But it also does have escape, 4 and a green, exile 3 other cards, and it does escape with a +1/+1 counter. So 4/1 for 3. I don't care. I don't want it. I can pay 5 and 3 cards to make it a 5/2. I don't care. I don't want it. Seems mediocre for limited, and if it's mediocre for limited, it's typically beyond unplayable for any other format, and that's what this card is. Up next is Heroes of the Revel. Heroes of the Revel is 4 and a red for a creature satyr soldier at uncommon. It's a 4/4. When it ETBs, you do get a 1/1 red satyr creature token with this creature can't block. And whenever you cast a spell that targets Heroes of the Revel, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So it's got heroic, basically. So this seems totally fine for limited. It seems like a solid top end for a very aggressive red deck, which I think is going to be a big thing in this format. It's a 5/5 for 5, so it's totally costed. Normally, it's a 4/4 and a 1/1. Add them together. And then whenever you target this, you half of a trumpet blast everything. Seems super great for limited. Standard, I don't see a play. 5 mana is just ludicrously expensive for something, especially something that doesn't have evasion. So this won't see any play outside of limited. Except again, Brawl, every card could be played in Brawl and every card can be given consideration. But in limited, I think this is pretty decent. Up next is Favored of Iris. I always say Iris. I think some people say Iroas. I don't know if I've ever heard it actually pronounced. Tell me. We'll get this one sorted out. Not like idyllic Grange Grange, whichever it is. Favorite of Iris is 2 and a white for a creature human soldier at uncommon. It's a 2/2 with Constellation. Whenever an enchantment ETBs under your control, it gains double strike until end of turn. Limited, this is not the kind of card I like to play, because if you don't get to trigger it, you just paid 3 mana for a bear, and that's horrendous. If you do get to trigger it, hopefully you do something with it, but you might not. Maybe your opponent just chumps that turn, and well, there goes your double strike plans. But then, of course, there are going to be those games where you put a Mantle of the Wolf on this and it becomes a 6/6 double strike, and your opponent didn't have a blocker and they're dead because they take 12. So it's going to be a card that I'm going to groan about a lot in Limited, but that I'm probably not going to play. Yeah, it's just not my style of play, and beyond Limited, there's just no play here. Our final card for today is Hero of the Pride. We're not going to take a look at the Planeswalker decks. I don't really see a need to look at those. Hero of the Pride is 1 and a white for a creature cat soldier at common. It's a 2/2. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Hero of the Pride, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. It looks like Heroic is almost a specific ability of Heroic here. It gives +1/+0 to your team. So it's a bear with an upside that if you target it, your team gets big. Probably going to be totally fine in a red-white aggressive deck, probably. Again, cards like this just make me think this trip to Theros might be really fast, unlike our last trip. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but we'll see. And this card, I don't know, maybe it could make its way into White Weenies. I doubt it. White Weenies just doesn't want to be playing stuff that targets individual creatures. It wants to just play more creatures or play mass pump spells. So I don't think this will make a splash at all in Standard, but it would be a consideration. Maybe if you're building like a budget version, but it's already a pretty budget deck. But yeah, in Limited, I think it's going to be totally fine. It's going to be aggressive, and I think it's going to help make this format a very fast format. But that's going to wrap it up for today's cards. We have one more of these videos tomorrow, based on whatever cards are left that they show us tomorrow. And then Friday, we're going to have the white set review up. Friday night, we're going to have the blue set review up here. And then each night after that, we'll have black, red, green, and then probably the rest. I don't think we're getting that many gold and artifact and land cards, so I don't think we really need to split anything up there. So make sure you're following and are ready for those set reviews. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me over on Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. Twitch, make sure you go check me out there. We streamed today, and it was ludicrous. We 3-0'd with a deck that had no business 3-0ing with, but boy, did we ever do it. You can also help me out over at patreon.com/ShamanaLeek. Absolutely anything that you can give there is super appreciated. Patrons are 100% what keeps this channel going. You guys are fantastic. You get access to the Discord, work your way towards earning a Mana League playmat, get access to potentially get the cards out of the pack one pick ones each week, etc. And of course, the easiest way to help is to like, share, and subscribe. But if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all next time.